The Aurora's Mercy didn't feel like a ship. It felt like a lie someone had engineered to be beautiful. Artificial sunlight poured through vaulted glass panels, bathing deck C-17 in a soft golden glow that mimicked a late afternoon that would never truly arrive. Rows of bioengineered trees swayed gently beneath hidden climate vents, their leaves whispering with programmed wind. The air smelled faintly of citrus and clean linen, too perfect, too controlled. Even the distant hum of the engines was tuned to a frequency designed to soothe the human nervous system. Elias Varn noticed all of it, not because he enjoyed it, but because he didn't trust it. He stood near the edge of the observation walkway, arms folded loosely, posture relaxed enough to pass as civilian, but nothing about him was truly at ease. His eyes moved in quiet, constant motion, counting, mapping, measuring. The reflective glass in front of him revealed more than the stars beyond. It showed him everything behind. Families strolling, a couple arguing in hushed tones, a maintenance drone hovering just a fraction too long near a junction panel. Patterns. There were always patterns. His clearance band still sat snug around his wrist, glowing a calm blue, the universal sign of non-threat. Non-priority. Civilian. Harmless. The system believed it. He didn't. He had boarded 3 hours ago. No escort, no debrief. No questioning looks from command. Just a silent approval through automated checkpoints that scanned him, validated him, and waved him through like he was nothing more than another passenger returning home. Somewhere, buried in layers of bureaucratic code, a single error had rewritten his purpose. Special forces, reassigned, misplaced. He could still feel the phantom weight of his armor, the tight press of tactical plating against his chest, the familiar grip of a rifle that wasn't there anymore. His body hadn't forgotten. It never would. Every sound here was wrong because it wasn't dangerous enough. Every face too relaxed, every corner too open. A child ran past him laughing, chasing a flickering holographic bird that chirped as it darted through the air. Elias watched the movement automatically, tracking speed, trajectory, possible collision points before catching himself. His jaw tightened slightly. This is what normal looks like, he reminded himself. You're not in a war zone. But the thought didn't settle. It never did. Above him, a transport announcement echoed softly through hidden speakers, pleasant, almost musical. Something about arrival estimates and recreational deck schedules. People listened. People smiled. Life continued in a carefully curated illusion of safety. Elias shifted his stance just slightly, repositioning so he had a clearer line of sight to the nearest exit corridor. Old habits didn't fade. They adapted. They waited. A server drone glided past, offering drinks with polite mechanical precision. Someone laughed behind him. Somewhere else, glass clinked. Everything was calm. Too calm. He exhaled slowly, steadying the tension coiled beneath his ribs. Maybe this was it. Maybe the system had made its mistake, and for once, nothing would come of it. No mission, no enemy, no blood, just a man, in the wrong place. But even as the thought formed, something deep inside him refused to believe it. Because peace, Elias Varn knew better than anyone, was never this quiet without a reason. The first flicker was so small that the ship almost convinced itself it hadn't happened, a single hesitation in the light. Then nothing. Then, again. Deck. C-17's artificial daylight trembled like a dying star behind glass. The golden glow that had felt so comforting only moments ago now seemed uncertain, as if the system generating it had begun to forget how. Shadows stretched in strange directions, too long, too sharp, snapping back into place a second later as though reality itself had stuttered. Elias noticed before anyone else even looked up. His head tilted slightly, eyes narrowing, not in panic but in recognition. Systems didn't flicker on a ship like this. Everything was redundant. Everything was layered. If one grid failed, another replaced it instantly. That was the promise of civilian deep space engineering, perfection through impossibility. So when the lights hesitated again, Elias already knew something had bypassed impossible. The ambient music cut mid-note, not faded, not transitioned, cut, like a throat being closed. A strange silence rolled through the deck, heavy and immediate, swallowing conversation. People still moved for a heartbeat longer, unaware their world had shifted. A glass remained suspended halfway to a mouth. A laugh started and died halfway through, confused even to its owner. Then came the realization spreading like cold ink. Something is wrong. The ship's hum, the constant, reassuring vibration that lived in the bones of every corridor, changed pitch. Not louder, not quieter, wrong in a way that made Elias's teeth tighten. He felt it more than heard it, like the structure itself had taken a breath and failed to exhale correctly. A child near the central garden slowed, looking up at the ceiling. The holographic birds above him flickered, their wings stuttering through broken flight patterns before dissolving into static feathers. Elias was already moving, not running, not reacting, positioning. His gaze swept the environment in clean mechanical arcs, exits, bottlenecks, blind corners. His mind mapped the deck in layers civilians couldn't see, where security drones should be, where emergency shutters would deploy, where people would panic first. But the drones weren't here. That was the second wrongness. A distant metallic sound echoed through the structure, not loud but deliberate, like something testing the ship's bones one strike at a time. Clang. Pause. Clang. Now people noticed. Heads turned. Conversations collapsed into uneasy fragments. What was that? Someone whispered. Probably maintenance, another answered too quickly. Elias didn't speak. His jaw tightened as he tracked the direction of the sound. Not random. Not drifting, approaching. Then the ship's intercom crackled, a burst of static, a fractured syllable. A system trying and failing to form language, and beneath it, another layer, not human, not ship-issued. A tone that didn't belong in any known communication protocol. The artificial lights dimmed again, this time not returning fully. Emergency strips along the floor ignited in dull red pulses, casting everyone in a slow, rhythmic warning glow. The kind designed for drills. The kind meant to feel controlled, but nothing about this felt controlled. Elias took a single step backward, aligning himself with the flow of people instinctively beginning to shift toward exits. His eyes never left the ceiling, because something up there had just stopped pretending it wasn't there, and the ship, vast, advanced, invincible in design, had just admitted, in the only language it knew how to speak. It was no longer alone. It didn't come through the doors first. That was the first thing Elias Varn's mind refused to accept, because doors implied rules, corridors, protocols, systems that could be understood, predicted, exploited. This thing didn't care about any of that. The ceiling of Deck C-17 tore open like it had been made of paper pretending to be steel. Not an explosion, no concussive blast, no warning pressure wave. Just a sudden, impossible deformation, as if reality itself had been grabbed by an unseen hand and peeled back layer by layer. Metal didn't bend, it complied. And through the widening rupture, something emerged. At first, it didn't even look like a creature. It looked like architecture gone wrong, angles that refused geometry, surfaces that absorbed light instead of reflecting it, a shifting silhouette that made the human eye struggle to hold its shape. Then it moved, and the illusion collapsed. It was alive. A descent of jointed limbs unfolded from the tear in the hull, each movement precise, economical, and utterly alien. Its body wasn't organic in any comforting sense of biology Elias recognized. There was no skin, no flesh, only layered structures like interlocking blades of obsidian and pale metallic bone. It didn't climb into the ship. It inserted itself into it, as if the vessel had been waiting to be opened. The air changed instantly. Ozone. Burned iron. A faint, sweet chemical undertone that made the back of Elias's throat tighten without explanation. The lighting strips along the floor flickered violently as if reacting to its presence, strobing red across the panic beginning to erupt among civilians. Someone screamed, then another. But Elias didn't move like them. He watched, because his brain, trained in environments where hesitation meant death, was already categorizing what he was seeing. Not animal, not machine. Something engineered for purpose. The creature's head, if it could be called that, tilted in a slow, scanning motion. No eyes in any conventional sense, but the effect was unmistakable. It was reading the room, mapping heat signatures, motion density, threat levels, and when its gaze passed over the crowd of civilians, there was no curiosity, only selection. A second rupture tore open further down the corridor. Then another. They weren't boarding. They were deploying. More figures dropped into the deck with unsettling synchronization, each one landing without impact noise, as if gravity had negotiated with them personally. Their movements were coordinated in a way that didn't resemble teamwork. It resembled hive cognition. A single intention distributed across multiple bodies. The ship's emergency systems finally responded. Too late. Bulkhead shutters began to descend, but one of the creatures extended a limb that split mid-motion, unfolding into a geometric emitter. A pulse of energy swept outward. Not a beam, not a blast, but a wave that bent the air itself. 3 civilians collapsed instantly. No blood. No visible injury. Just bodies shutting down like systems forcibly powered off. That was when Elias felt it shift inside him. Not fear, recognition. This wasn't random piracy. This wasn't territorial aggression or desperation. There was discipline in the way they moved. Efficiency in the way they eliminated resistance before it could form. They weren't here to fight. They were here to process. A child cried out somewhere behind him, but the sound felt distant now, like it belonged to another layer of reality. Elias's vision narrowed, his awareness sharpening into something cold and precise. He understood the truth in fragments before it fully formed. This ship wasn't a target of opportunity. It was a resource, and every civilian on board was inventory. The lead creature turned slightly, as if sensing the shift in attention, and for the first time its motion paused on Elias Varn, as if something in him didn't match the rest of the room, as if, in a system that had already categorized everyone as prey, it had just found an anomaly. Elias didn't reach for a weapon because there wasn't one, and because, somewhere deep beneath thought, beneath training, beneath instinct, he already understood something most people on this ship still hadn't accepted. If you waited for permission to survive, you were already dead. The first alien moved again, fast but not chaotic. Every motion was calculated, like a program executing an inevitability. It stepped over the collapsed bodies without acknowledging them, its attention locked on the crowd that had begun to fracture into panic. Families broke apart. People ran in directions that made emotional sense but tactical nonsense. Toward sealed doors, toward dead ends, toward each other. Elias moved the other way, toward control. A service cart sat abandoned near a fractured food kiosk, its metal frame still humming with residual power. In one fluid motion, he grabbed it, twisted, and shoved it into motion. It rolled forward just as the second alien adjusted its aim. The impact wasn't dramatic, it was disruptive. The cart slammed into the alien's line of sight, scattering trays, utensils, and reflective panels across the floor in a chaotic burst of motion and light. For half a second, just half a second, the creature recalculated. Half a second was all Elias ever needed. He was already there. He closed. Distance like a decision already made. A maintenance panel ripped free under his grip as he tore it from the wall, sharp-edged, half-molten from the earlier energy discharge. It wasn't a sword. It wasn't meant to be. But in his hands, it became one anyway. The first strike wasn't about damage, it was about timing. He hit the joint where structure met motion, not guessing, reading. Every combat doctrine drilled into him. Every hostile environment engagement, every simulation where enemies didn't behave like humans. The panel cut through a vulnerable seam, forcing the alien's limb to recoil. It reacted instantly, too fast for anything natural. A counterstrike whipped toward him, slicing air where his head had been a fraction of a second earlier. Elias dropped low, rolling beneath it, his shoulder slamming into the floor hard enough to jar bone, but not slow him. Pain was information, not limitation. Around him, civilians were still screaming, still scattering, but something changed in their movement. A pattern emerged, not because panic had stopped, but because direction had been injected into it. "Stay low," Elias shouted, voice cutting through chaos like a blade through fog. "Move when I tell you. Corridor B now." He didn't expect obedience, but humans in extremis look for certainty, even borrowed certainty, and he had it. A second alien advanced on the crowd. Elias intercepted without hesitation, using a collapsing light fixture as a pivot point, launching himself upward just enough to collide with its flank. The impact was ugly, improvised, violent. The creature staggered, not wounded, but disrupted again. That was the pattern, not strength, interference. He wasn't trying to overpower them. He was trying to break their rhythm. Another civilian group shifted when he pointed, herding not by command, but by instinctive trust in motion that looked controlled. He guided them between structural pillars, using narrow angles the aliens couldn't easily exploit without slowing. Every second was layered. Above him, emergency shutters began to descend again, too slow, too predictable. One alien extended its arm, and the air shimmered, charging. Elias saw it before it fired. He threw himself forward instead of away. The blast hit behind him, vaporizing a section of wall and showering the corridor in molten fragments. Heat washed over his back. His suit burned. His skin tightened. He kept moving, because stopping meant giving the aliens exactly what they expected. Targets that behaved like victims. But Elias Varn wasn't a victim. He was a problem they hadn't budgeted for. And in a ship designed for peace, among people trained to flee, one misfiled soldier had just turned survival into a strategy. The last alien fell without ceremony. No roar, no final display of power, no cinematic collapse that made sense to the human mind. It simply stopped, like something had finally cut the signal holding it together. Elias Varn stood over it, chest rising and falling in slow, controlled breaths that his body had learned in places where oxygen was optional, and panic was a luxury people died for. The maintenance blade, if it could still be called that, hung loosely in his hand, its edge warped, scorched and dripping with residual heat that evaporated into the air in thin, ghost-like trails. Around him, silence didn't arrive cleanly. It had to fight its way in. The ship was still screaming in pieces, alarms trapped in loops, distant structural groans, emergency shutters grinding halfway down and freezing like confused thoughts. Somewhere deeper in the vessel, systems tried to reboot themselves into coherence, failing and retrying like a dying brain refusing to accept collapse. But on deck C-17, the immediate violence had ended, and that was almost worse. Civilians were everywhere, some crouched behind overturned furniture, shaking so violently their teeth clicked against each other in broken rhythm. Others stared at Elias like he was part of the same nightmare that had just tried to erase them. A child clung to a shattered service drone, mistaking its cold chassis for something alive enough to be safe. No one spoke, not because they were calm, because they didn't know what language still applied. Elias took a slow step back, lowering his weapon. His eyes scanned automatically, counting bodies, identifying injuries, mapping threats that no longer existed but his instincts refused to dismiss. The deck was a war zone, pretending it had never learned the word. Smoke drifted through artificial sunlight, now fractured by emergency red strobes. The once soft golden ambiance of the ship had become something else entirely, an unstable flicker between beauty and ruin. The engineered garden nearby still stood untouched, absurdly peaceful, leaves swaying in a breeze that no longer felt real. Survival and serenity occupying the same space like incompatible truths. A security drone finally dropped into view from a ceiling port, late, jittering, its optics struggling to focus. It hovered uncertainly, scanning Elias first, then the alien remains, then the civilians, as if it had arrived after the story ended and wasn't sure which version of reality to report. He let it look, because for the first time since boarding, he wasn't hiding anything. His breath steadied, not because the danger was gone, but because his body had accepted what his mind already knew. This wasn't over. It was never just one breach, one wave, one mistake. Systems didn't fail like this without cause. Predators didn't board vessels like this without purpose. And somewhere in the ship above and beyond them, something else was still alive, watching, calculating. The civilians began to shift slowly now, uncertain steps replacing frozen terror. A man whispered something, maybe a question, maybe a prayer, but the words dissolved before they could take shape. Elias finally spoke, voice low, steady, cutting through the aftermath like a line drawn in ash. Stay together, he said. Not a request. Not hope. A directive formed out of necessity. Because in his experience, survival didn't belong to the strongest or the safest. It belonged to whoever could still organize chaos into action. He looked once more at the broken alien forms, at the impossible geometry of their bodies now inert and silent, then upward, toward the unseen depths of the ship. Whatever had sent them here hadn't failed. It had simply tested the room. And Elias Varn, misfiled and forgotten by the system that placed him here, understood something with absolute clarity. The real invasion had not yet revealed its full hand. Elias didn't move.